Welcome to episode 3 of the Uplift Millions show. My name's Alok Padharai. I'm founder of Uplift Millions, and I am a top growth coach behind 1,000 CEOs, founders, entrepreneurs, and leaders who have trusted me to help them uncover their limiting beliefs, get through their biggest hurdles and obstacles, and accelerate their growth, collapse time to whatever outcomes they want to have in their business, their personal life, and beyond. Today, I want to dive into a really, really deep topic, which is simply the misogyny of men towards women in this world. And I'm going to just take a powerful stand around this topic that many male leaders do not want to touch, and certainly not ones that have big platforms. Maybe at best, they'll say something in alignment with women behind the scenes or to a couple friends or maybe to their wife or their spouse. But generally speaking, what I don't see happening is men really leveraging their platforms to begin to speak into this issue. And so I've made the bold decision that I will be using my platform accordingly. And today I got asked by a woman in my world who's known me for about 10 years. And she said, Alok, I've really appreciated the posts that you've been putting out recently, especially about the Epstein files and the current leadership in the United States. Have you always been this way? Have you always felt a call to stand for women? And she just peppered me with a bunch of questions in a loving way, really curious, because her bigger point was, she said, Alok, it has been so healing to my heart to hear a man like you speaking about these issues. Can you talk to me about where that came from? So I decided I would record this next podcast episode about this issue because it affects all of us. Absolutely all of us. And for years, women have been saying that they need men to speak up, that women have felt like they are carrying the issue alone, the issue of sexual abuse, rape, violence against women, and all of the subversions of that, the smaller, more innocuous, the little cat calling, the statements, all the things that have been going on for millennia, generations after generations. The real call is that nothing will change until men begin to speak up, until men begin to hold other men accountable. So I'm going to dive into my own journey with this, and I'm going to be really real and raw and unscripted. There isn't a template or progression about exactly what I'm going to talk about today, except that I'm going to just share my truth. So the first thing I need to say is that I'm no saint. I'm not perfect in this regard. I have participated and added to the misogyny in my life, in the world through my life. And I've made plenty of mistakes, as particularly in my younger years. I'm not someone that's going to sit here and talk on this podcast as if I'm some guru on a lotus pad who's never contributed to this issue. That would be a lie. That would be a complete lie. And thankfully, I don't have circumstances in my past that are grand grievances that are the real horrific contributions. But nonetheless, I have contributed. And so it's important that you know that that's where I'm coming from here. I'm not here to necessarily point fingers at anybody, except to say I'm a man who's putting his foot down and planting his flag in the ground imperfectly today, to the best of my ability. So let's go back to the beginning. The truth of the matter is, what I told this woman today in our voice notes back and forth was that I saw pornography way too young. I was age 6, and it was back in the day in the 1980s where porn magazines were still available in drugstores at levels that young people could still reach, like physically reach, which is crazy to me now. Just think about that. Imagine that there was a Playboy or a Hustler like at the level that a short 6-year-old could reach. And so that left a major imprint on me. And it was something that I didn't really understand how it was shaping my mind and my brain when it came to women. And then fast forward, as I moved into puberty and, all of my hormones and everything started kicking in, I started navigating all this primal energy about girls and about women. And look, I want to say that in hindsight, that primal energy, there's nothing wrong with it. It's actually a beautiful coding of how many of us men have a beautiful attraction for women. But it begins to get morphed by a society that objectifies women, right? That begins to treat women like objects, like from when they are little girls. And so when we've got this issue of Jeffrey Epstein and the mass abuse in a systemic way by supremely powerful men at all levels of government and corporations, including Fortune 500 corporations around the world that are directly or indirectly part of a circumstance with a known child sex trafficker, we begin to have to confront as a society that this is not a small issue. It's not a one-off issue. It's actually a major issue, and that girls are objectified from younger and younger ages, to the point where a female reporter went on air and tried to make the distinction. She actively made the distinction that Epstein wasn't a pedophile because he liked 15-year-olds and not 5-year-olds. I mean, this is like just like, to me, it was, I listened to the entire clip and I said, this is an insanity. Like, this is a reflection of an insanity of the human condition. How about the notion of underage women? There's no such thing. They're a girl. And so as men, like, we can no longer pretend that our complicity and our silence around our own behaviors and the behaviors of the men around us, what's called locker room talk, is okay anymore. It's simply not. But why would we be silent, she asked. Why do men not speak up? Well, for all sorts of reasons. First and foremost, I believe there's guilt, because even good-hearted men who aren't actively enjoying the journey of being in patriarchy or being a misogynist, right? There's that category, which I'll speak to in a little while. But let's take the good-hearted men. We know that we have some what I call cringe in our history, in our past. And because of that cringe, right, maybe whatever behaviors we may have done or the ways in which we didn't treat a woman right, or a girl when we were teenagers, or whatever our history is, where we made decisions that something inside of us knows just wasn't okay. It wasn't right. It wasn't kosher. We will have a cognitive dissonance about speaking out about it, partially because of our own shame, right? That which we have not yet metabolized about ourselves and our own behavior. So how can we call out somebody else? So that's one layer of it. It's not excusable, by the way. I'm just answering the question of, why do men stay silent? Why do men hesitate from speaking up about this, leaving it to all the women to do so? I'd say a big part of it is shame. It's shame of our own behaviors, shame of the mistakes that we've made that we haven't atoned for, where we haven't apologized. And, you know, there was a woman that I was not respectful to in high school. I was, I think, 16 years old. And I'm not going to get into the specifics of it just to honor that circumstance. But I was not respectful when the story, quote unquote, came out. And I knew that. Like, inside, I knew that there was something wrong about my behavior. But the ball started rolling, and so then I just went with it. And for years, I knew this was true. And I knew that I had not been honest about a circumstance, and that it was her who took the brunt on her reputation. This is just, come on, we got to be honest that this stuff occurs. And so, yeah, I do all this work today that's looking to uplift humanity, but let's get real. I needed to address that circumstance. And so years later, sometime in college, I think, I was at a bar, and my friends and I, this was back when I was still a drinker, and friends of mine and I were there, and I saw her. I hadn't seen her in years. And even though I was inebriated, I sobered myself up because I knew I needed to go apologize to her. And so I just got my courage up because I knew what had gone on was not right. And God had created an environment now where I could atone, and come what may. I didn't expect anything from her. And I just approached her and I said, listen, that was not okay. That was not acceptable. What went on? That was not, you did not deserve to be treated that way. I apologize. I owned it. And I said, you don't need to say anything to me. You don't need to, coddle me here, whatever the case may be. And she just paused and she looked at me and she said, thank you. And I say this not to make myself look like a saint. I say it because that is part of the process here that we as men get to go through, which is to apologize, to take responsibility for at least as many of the mistakes that we're conscious of. Because Lord knows all the ways in which we did smaller things that we weren't conscious of that we can't atone for because we don't actually remember that we did it. So the first part that can facilitate taking a stand publicly, I would argue, is to begin to privately take responsibility for ways in which I was not a gentleman, was not in my highest and best, led by my dick, right? I mean, there's there's hormones raging, all the things. Doesn't it matter? Doesn't excuse it. All the moments with friends where you kind of say some things about, girls or women around you, depending on what age bracket you were in, none of it was okay. None of it. None of it. I look back and I'm like, oh, the cringe is just so obvious to me today. And yet many men won't want to look at the cringe. Why? Because there's cognitive dissonance that comes up about how you view yourself today if you actually admit that maybe you did some things in your past that you're not super proud of. And so getting over that cognitive dissonance, that identity conflict that will come up. How can I see myself as a good person today if I actually admit what I did in the past? And that's a big leap. That is a huge leap that many men just don't want to do. They're taught, they're hardwired not to do it. Why? Because admitting fault is almost a sign of weakness. And we are taught that weakness will be destroyed. So look at all the programming that's going on that's teaching men to harden up, to put a shell, to defend themselves at all costs, right? To deny, deflect. All of that was programmed into them somewhere along the way, right? That they sort of got taught that if you admit something like that, what else could be true about you? And what might they say about you, right? And so I just want to acknowledge to every man out there who may be listening to this, it's okay. It's actually incredibly empowering when you begin to do this piece of the work. Extraordinarily empowering. It may feel terrifying as you begin the process. I remember a couple of years ago, I was on a podcast with a guy named Gerald Rogers, and he and I got into this conversation. And he said a line that was like, he said, yeah, once you have this awakening about how we typically treat women, you'll realize that you got a lot of phone calls to make. So it can feel terrifying. There can feel like a loss of a sense of self. There can feel like a tremendous shame swell can occur within you. And what most humans are designed to do is do what's called a shame defense, right? Why? And it makes sense because a part of us wants to protect us from the pain, right? That's a lot of how we're hardwired, is to protect ourselves from pain, right? To avoid pain at all costs. So one of the standard operating tools is called a shame defense, where it will literally do everything to prevent you from confronting shame, because the pain of that shame almost feels like you're going to die. And yet imagine what the people on the other side of those behaviors felt, right? And of course, oh God, now that would mean we actually have to humanize them and admit that they had feelings, and maybe those feelings are ones that will create even more shame inside of us. And so it's easier to close your eyes. It's easier to pretend like that didn't occur, or well, I was just young and dumb at that time, or that was just normal back then, right? So you'll hear people talk generationally. You'll hear people excuse misogyny in older generations. Well, that was just how men talked back then. That's just how the workplace was back then. No, that was pure on, full on misogyny and patriarchy and toxic behavior and abuse and narcissistic treatment of half the population as a normalized state. And so the only way we begin to shift this is we begin to raise our collective consciousness as men. That's the only way change occurs and people say, well, what is collective consciousness? Just how we think as a group, okay? We don't need think and feel. Consciousness is like, what are we aware of, right? So, for example, if you take racism, there were things that were totally tolerated as normal when it came to people of certain skin tones that are just simply not as tolerated today. They still are, by the way. There's still whole communities that celebrate that way of treating other people. That is not gone by any stretch of the imagination. All you have to do is go to a European soccer match, particularly in countries like Spain, and you will experience, in Italy, you'll experience racism in the stands being like chanted at players of a certain skin tone. So it's just less tolerated, and you've now got FIFA and all these major soccer governing bodies that are beginning to say that's not okay, and they're starting to arrest people, right? What is that? That's a shift in consciousness. It's so what we're asking for here in relation to women and girls is a shift in consciousness, where more and more men begin to think and feel and then have the courage to speak, right? We got to think and feel something before we will speak something. And that starts with us. And it starts with looking in the mirror. It starts with saying, where have I participated in this? And being willing to overcome that shame defense that will likely want to avoid this at all costs. Now, how do we know this is true? Because many men, and there's a particular man from my high school days, and he has daughters now. And I'm like, wow, like, what's that like? Right. And we're not in touch, and I don't know. But I get the sense when I tune into the field that, he loves being a dad and that he loves, his daughters. And I'm like, yeah, but man, you like, whoa, the way you treated women was not good. So has his consciousness shifted? Is he objectifying women less? Like, because once we connect to, well, what about your sister, your daughter, your mother, your aunt, your grandmother, your best friends, right? Your childhood friends, like all these women around you, like, can you really still close your eyes? And when it comes to the leadership in the United States that currently is very connected to Epstein and that whole world, and by the way, this crosses political lines, I say out them all. I say get all the names that were involved, and they should all handle the repercussions of being associated with a known child trafficker. There's no surprise. It'd be no surprise to anybody. It shouldn't be. You're all very, very smart men. They just happen to be super powerful, and for a long time, the collective consciousness did not hold that to account. And so they could participate in it, I think, assuming that it would never come out, that there would be no repercussions, because these behaviors fall in the category of protect our boys, right? It's like the swimmer Brock so-and-so from Stanford who was caught raping a girl, a college student, behind a dumpster, and he got charges pressed against him. And then somehow the judge, this is one of those crazy stories, the judge basically gave him like almost no sentence, saying that a harmful verdict would harm his career and his life. It's like, what about the girl that he raped? What about her? But we protect, we excuse, we defend our boys, right? And then we have lines like, boys will be boys. What is that? No, I have a son, he's 13, and I have talked to him about porn. I've talked to him about the objectification of women and the difference between being attracted to the female body, the female form, where there's nothing wrong with that. I don't want him to feel shame. I think the female form is exquisite, beautiful. But I don't want him to somehow think, oh, I can't look at a woman or look at girls. He's, girls his age or whatever. Um, but I've talked to him about what the difference between being attracted to the female body, to the female form, to the female face, and being objectifying, and to listen for it in his friends group, and to say, we don't talk that way, right? And so in my journey with all of this, that the first piece of the silence, what holds men back, I think, is that shame. Another big piece is the fear of the repercussions of speaking out loud about it. And I'm not saying this is right, by the way. I'm just saying this is what holds a lot of men back. So, do they fear losing business? Do they fear all of a sudden I'll lose half my clientele, right? If I come out about the Epstein thing, right? Or will I, you know, what will I lose? Now, this makes sense too, because our brain, our primal brain, is programmed to protect us. And our primal brain fears scarcity of resources. So we will historically, that is just how we, sadly, how we are hardwired, which is to fear the loss of resources. And by the way, this is even very, very rich, powerful people, right? So I don't want to lose. I don't want to lose those business relationships. I don't want to lose those door openers. I don't want to lose those clients who don't want to do business with me, who think I'm, too politically active or polarizing, or not in the boys club, not playing the golf, and in the various clubs, which is the misogyny club. So that if I was, what will I lose? The question I think they're unconsciously asking is, what will I lose by speaking out against, even if I know it's wrong, even if I know what they're doing is wrong, or even I know my participation in it is wrong. So that, I think, is a big piece, is the loss factor. Sadly, I'm not saying it's right, by the way. I'm just revealing why a lot of men stay silent. And then the third reason is the fear of violence. So men solve problems with violence very often. It's a standard operating procedure of menfolk. So men, even if they're witnessing something not okay happening to a woman, many of them will freeze, either because they don't feel physically strong enough to defend her and themselves, much less themselves. So, especially if the aggressor is a bigger person. Now, again, this is not right. I'm just telling you what happens. I think there's a lot of freeze response. Partially because I don't think many men had fathers that were talking to them actively about what to do when you see a woman getting violated verbally, physically, or emotionally. Right? It's not a common, like, hey, Johnny, let's pull up a chair and let's talk about this. It's like, no. So then when it happens right in front of you at a party where maybe one of your female friends gets groped, or a guy is so drunk that he's like actively hitting on her way across the line, what do you say? What do you do? And this, I think, is a big one. That fear of violence, it's, again, not excusable. It's just a big piece of the equation. But this female friend of mine today, she asked me, Alok, have you always cared about this? Have you always been a strong stand for women? Have you always been like this? And what I told her was that I have been both sides of the equation. That when I was young, I both knew right from wrong, but I also did some of the wrong. That's the honest truth. That's the unpretty, non-sugar-coated truth. But what I did say was, I said there was a turning point, and I've been forbidden to talk about this, which is very sad to me. But I've been told I have to honor, so I can't actually talk about the circumstance to honor the person for whom that circumstance occurred. But the simplest way I think I can say it is, there was a very, very significant occurrence that occurred, let's say, multiple decades in my past, and not having to do with, I was not the perpetrator or the victim, but I can't go any further into it except to tell you that it changed my life completely. And my answer to her was, that shaped my life in this regard completely. There was no more pretending like these issues don't destroy a woman's life completely. That rape, sexual assault, sexual violence, whatever you want to call it. It's funny how people make distinctions, right? Our current leader was held liable for sexual assault, but some people want to claim it wasn't rape. Got it. Okay, got it. But the point here is that that occurrence that I can't speak about publicly, uh, it made it unignorable. I could no longer uh, pretend that these things weren't right in front of my face. And I took action about that occurrence. I didn't stay silent. I didn't pretend. But I noticed that also a lot of my guy friends didn't really know what to do, didn't know how to handle it. Because, at that age, none of us were taught how you handle that stuff. It's not talked about. There's not a society that says, here's what you do when this occurs. And so I guess I'm sharing this podcast to be part of blowing the lid off this thing and say, yeah, we're not perfect as men, but it is time to not let that get in the way of us having conversations and taking a stand on these issues that are affecting every single one of our families. There is not a man out there who does not know at least one woman who has been raped, violated, sexually assaulted. Just take that in. The statistics are that 1 out of 3 women and girls will be violated, and 1 out of 5 men and boys will have been violated. So with that statistic, every man knows enough men that he knows at least one, and he likely knows like 50, if not 100. The average American knows 600 people. So call half of them, 300 of them women, and let's call 1 out of 3 of them in this statistical category. That means that every man knows 100 women who have been violated in some way, shape, or form, period. Plus or minus, however much you want to say. But even just knowing one, right? In my case, my mom revealed to me when I was, probably a teenager, maybe in my 20s, that she had been violated around age 14 and in the garage of a neighbor's house. And I don't even know how many of our family members know this, but that affected me deeply. It was like, that was not okay. And that man never went to jail for that, of course. I mean, the amount of men that go to jail for these infractions is like minuscule, right? Because people will say, well, the current leadership, all the cases were thrown out. Yeah, that's because look at the standard with which one has to achieve in order to get somebody prosecuted, much less get them actually put in prison for something. I know multiple men who should be in jail, who at least should have spent some time in jail, but they're just walking around free, completely free. Now they're in the prison of their own minds because they've had to do some serious gymnastics to pretend like they didn't do some crazy stuff, and that'll deep six their empathy, and their shame defenses will just be on high alert. And then there are the ones that are simply sociopaths and psychopaths that don't have the part of the brain that can feel for anybody else. But then there's the other layers that I see every day. For example, today I followed up on a second post by a male coach, relationship kind of guy who always does these posts that are straight up misogynistic to me, right? And he's got a lot of bravado, and a major superiority complex. And I noticed that every time I respond on his posts, holding him to account, he doesn't engage my comments. And today I left him a comment, just literally asking him, like, what does he get out of these behaviors in these posts, right? Because I don't sit there and get up in arms. I don't get angry. I don't tell him he's wrong. Like, I don't do that sort of reactive. I just say what I'm seeing and I name it. And I asked him, what benefit does he get? Does he get a rush of superiority? Like, what is the thing that's happening inside his body? Well, what was his reaction? He blocked me. No surprise, because I wasn't one of 2 other categories. Either there's women in his world that sort of kind of go along with this narcissistic puppet show that you just see, that plays all these games with these language patterns that are just obvious. Once you learn the language patterns, you can spot manipulation a mile away, and they don't like that. When you are the one that can see manipulation, you're like, oh, right, yeah, that doesn't feel good. That doesn't make me comfortable. I don't want that guy around, right? So it's either these women that are sort of like dancing in his manipulative game, or there's the men who are misogynists that are like roaring away, right? And you're like, wow, here it is. It's right here. And so they don't like to be called up. I don't like to call people out. That has a inference of shame. I'm not here to shame them. I want to raise the consciousness. I want to begin to challenge it, saying, because I'm going to challenge myself. I'm not sitting here saying I'm a saint here. But what I noticed was men don't like being confronted either with where they're misogynistic or where they're silent about misogyny. It's uncomfortable. It feels challenging. So either they're in this very alpha energy, what I call the traditional alpha energy, right? Which is just like, swinging around with their, dicks out, kind of leading to lead that way. Or they're afraid they don't want to be challenged about their silence, their complicity, right? The number of, I happen to be in the transformational men's space, the transformational coaching space, work with men and women. I like growth. I like people blossoming to the fullest power of their potential and creating businesses that uplift humanity and all the things. I love all that. And I happen to track leaders across many of these industries. And I have literally noticed that zero of all the men that have big platforms, particularly in the transformation space, who are standing for uplifting humanity and making people's lives better and being in personal growth and personal development and all these things, guess how many of them have actually done a long form post about this topic? Zero. In second place is one man with a big platform who has done a meme style post speaking about the current leadership of the United States and its relationship to women and the ripple effect of that, right? And I saluted him for doing that. That was huge. But I've literally seen zero of the big names, much less any long forms from major leaders of major companies who all have daughters, mothers, sisters, grandmothers, right? And to do so, they'd fear like, would I lose a deal? Would I lose a business partnership? Well, you know what? We need to start having an era where you don't do business with sexual abusers. How about that? How about that as a standard? Or at least they have to have outed themselves and atone and taken responsibility and are beginning to grow and increase their awareness and begin to start cultivating a culture that is safe for women and girls around the world. How about that? But how about simply if that guy is treating women like shit, you don't do business with them. No matter the amount of profit you stand to gain. How about that? How about you be able to look your daughters or your wife or your sisters and say, you know what, I have a standard. I don't do business with predatory men. How about that? I'm game for that. I look at all the men in these threads and I'm like, yep, we won't be doing business. I don't care how much money I could make from them. If you are defending and protecting all these behaviors like racism, bigotry, homophobia, misogyny, no, I don't care how much money we could make together. I'm not doing it. I'm not going to promulgate a system where men make money with other men who think all that's okay. I just do not believe it's the way. And people call this divisive. I don't call it divisive. I've been tasked to be a way shower, starting with myself. That's why I say I am not perfect. I am not a saint. I'm not going to sugarcoat my past. I got some blunders in there. Oof, ugh. But I'm not going to continue to participate in it. And I'm certainly not going to make money on people that are openly still thinking that that is okay. I'm not going to turn a blind eye. If I know you are a misogynist, we will not be doing business together. It is not how I do business. It's not who I do business with. I'm going to invite other men folk to start holding that line. That, the locker room talk and the ways in which men in business bond with each other gets to change. It gets to no longer have the same standards where you go ink a deal either on the golf course or underneath the hooker pole at the strip club, right? That whole world. And people call it toxic masculinity. It's not toxic masculinity. There is, as one of my friends says, there is no such thing as toxic masculinity. A client of mine, either Segev or Sanika, I don't remember which one of them said it, Segev Peretz or Sanika, the Firestarter Street. They said there is no such thing as toxic masculinity because masculinity, by its definition, is not toxic. Masculinity would never do these types of behaviors. So it's just toxic. That's what we're talking about here, right? The kind of culture, whether it's Wall Street, big business, that normalizes just a gluttonous consumption of anything and everything in its path, including women, regardless of whether you've got your wife at home and 3 daughters at home, and you come home and you know you took lines of cocaine off the hooker's ass and then treated her like garbage, right? It's like, we just need to begin to say we're not doing business that way, that is not acceptable. I'm saying that. I'm going to use my platform right here to say we want to start uplifting millions, which is what I stand for. It starts by saying we got to have a powerful conversation about how men treat women. And let's not leave out the women who defend and excuse it as well, right? The women who protect their boys in football culture in high schools and colleges across the United States. No, not acceptable. There is so much rape and sexual abuse culture in sports programs and fraternity programs. It was rampant. Everybody knew in college, but there's so much money flowing through in the form of donations and all those things. See, I'll get canceled for half this stuff, but it is the truth. It is known. This is not speculation. We don't need to have proof. It is a known part of the culture that the boys will be boys actually means the boys will be violating girls. And so then you've got a culture of women who are complicit in that and protect them at all costs because they can't bear their boys being prosecuted for behaviors that are absolutely intolerable, rather than raising their sons to say, you'd never do that to a girl. You never do that to a girl. You never do that to a woman, right? Like, where's that culture beginning? So I'm willing to go first. I'm doing my best to raise my son in a different way and to begin to just name what these things are and to say, it is time. This is not a political issue. This is not a left versus right. This is not a Republican versus Democrat issue. I say flush them all out. You do not get a leadership position in business or government or community, if these things are tolerated. And that includes the religious organizations that protect all of the pedophile priests. Come on. We got to say no. I don't care if you think that is the house of your God. Just put that together. Wow. I'm going to support all of these bishops and popes and everybody who just shuffles these abusers to different dioceses and parishes and churches. This is insane. That is not your God. That is human affliction of the mind in robes that people call religion and a house of worship and God. No, look at the numbers. The numbers are absolutely astronomical. How about in the entertainment industry? You got the Harvey Weinsteins and the P. Diddy's just feeding. How about in the real estate industry? There's these real estate brothers that just got put away for running sex trafficking rings. How about we talk about Andrew Tate, who our current leader just helped essentially get a pardon from Romania for child sex trafficking, right? Let's look at the culture that the Andrew Tates of the world have cultivated in susceptible young men, getting this birthing misogyny into them and making millions and millions of dollars out of it. How about the sports culture at universities like the Michigan State and places where they had gymnasts, hundreds and hundreds of gymnasts who were given pelvic exams. And you think the presidents and everybody just didn't know? No, there's so much money. See, until we divorce our addiction to money and protect anything that will be a threat to the flow of money, we will have a culture that continues to turn a blind eye to the abuse of young people, primarily girls, but boys also. And then just at a certain point, we need to have people who just start saying that's not acceptable. Not acceptable in our religious organizations, our political organizations, our educational organizations, our governmental organizations, our business organizations, our social organizations, our spiritual organizations, like all the number of spiritual leaders that end up violating women and girls and using their spiritual powers for manipulation. It's all just manipulation. Power and sexual appetite run wild in a culture that doesn't just not say no to it, but actually rewards it. Look at the top leader of our country right now. And I've got one bunch of friends who will defend him at all costs, no matter what the circumstances. They will always defend him. And I say to them, they'll say, well, he was never convicted, or that conviction was this, or that got thrown out, or that was a political stunt. Well, but imagine someone like Pablo Escobar, like the largest drug trafficker in history, basically. And yes, he wasn't caught and convicted, but everybody knew he was a drug trafficker. And, sure, we want to have innocent until proven guilty, but we have our president on record talking about his attraction to his daughter. If she wasn't his daughter, essentially he'd like to have sex with her. Like, that's not acceptable. Like, we just need to not go, well, but it's okay. But no, it's actually just not okay. How about that? It is not okay. That behavior is not acceptable. And so once we begin to draw different lines, starting in ourselves with what's acceptable, what's not acceptable, right? Because a big issue that many people don't want to talk about is what's called leaky sexual energy. And men just are not taught what leaky sexual energy is, all the way from the harmless little flirtings. What is it? It's all manipulation and power and getting a little dopamine hit of the ego, all the way to, does she want to sleep with me? All the way to, oops, I cheated on my wife for the 7th time, right? So time to raise the standard. Time for us to say enough is enough. And that starts with our own selves. And it then stems to our daughters and our sons. With our sons, it's setting standards for how they treat girls. And that means verbally, what do they tolerate in their friend groups, the treatment and how they touch women and girls. And then it floods into the girls, which is what standards they hold for themselves of how they get to be treated by men. Right. And by the way, I have clients where I'm like putting those standards in now with them as women. I'm like, no, that guy does not make the cut. That guy does not make the grade. That guy is not treating you with honor, dignity, respect in alignment with who you are as a woman and a powerful creator, right? Because it will stunt their ability to grow their dreams, their businesses, and anything that I've been brought in as a growth coach to be able to cultivate in them. It will reduce that. So I'm here to just say no. No more. Enough is enough. All of the excuses and the reasons and the tolerations that are occurring in our society, the high degree of tolerance for that which really should just not be tolerated, no longer gets to be tolerated. It will only change as men begin to say, that's not tolerable. That's not acceptable. That behavior doesn't fly here. I do not participate in that way of treating women and girls, not one day further. And the action steps we get to take are this. 1, go apologize to any woman that you may have done a behavior that you're not proud of. Just simply begin. It may not feel comfortable, but you'll likely be giving her some form of a closure that maybe she never had. Maybe you'll have a conversation. Maybe it won't be comfortable. Maybe it won't go well, but go do it. Just begin that process. 2, begin to talk to your sons and your daughters differently. Begin to have these conversations. Don't worry if they're uncomfortable. Don't worry if you screw it up. Don't worry about screwing it up. Just start. Imperfectly take action. 3, use your platforms to begin to say these things are not acceptable. Come what may. Risk losing some reputation. Risk losing some business. Heaven forbid you might lose some money because you stand up for women and girls. Go for it. Let it rip. Don't worry about getting it perfect. Don't worry about saying the exact right thing. Say it imperfectly. Say it regardless of your past. Maybe you admit, yeah, I wasn't perfect in my past. Yeah, oops, wow, look at that. But you'll actually start noticing something will happen inside of you because you'll start being surrounded by men that are walking a different way, who will see you standing in that and they'll say, I see you, I honor you, I respect you. These are not weak men. I have very strong, powerful men. We all walk this way. This is who I surround myself with today, is men folk who are beginning to say, yeah, that's not okay. And these are not soft, wimpy, sensitive men. These are powerful, strong males, apex non-predators who are roaming the jungle saying, if we talk a big game about provide and protect, part of that is what we stand for in our words, our actions, our deeds, our energies, our attitudes, our treatment of women. And can we be on a mission imperfectly to become the safest man in the room? I know that's a work in progress for me. I know that I've not always succeeded at that. So stop worrying about perfection and just begin. That's the biggest thing I can say is start imperfectly. Don't worry about it. And yeah, you might have some things that don't go exactly right, but go for it. Tee it up. Make a post. Say what you can no longer stay silent around. I can no longer stay silent about. That is an easy prompt. Go tee it up right now across every one of your social media platforms and just see what occurs. Because guess what? I have gained more than I lost as a result of doing this. I have gained more than I lost. And whatever I lost was not meant for me to have. Can you get that? Whatever business relationships I lost were not meant for me to benefit from, for me to profit from. Whatever people faded out of my orbit because they had opinions about me speaking about this topic, they were not meant for me to be engaging with in this lifetime. Just allow that to be true. That whatever might burn away was meant to be burned away, and you were just too afraid to do it because you thought the benefits of keeping it around were bigger than the benefits of standing your ground, of standing by your standards, of raising your standards, of owning your standards, of being a man who walks this planet with a different set of standards of what you accept and tolerate in yourself and the men folk around you. I guarantee you start becoming this type of man, you will hear from women saying, thank you. Thank you. I feel a little safer on this planet because you had the courage to do that. And the prompt can simply be, this is what I can no longer stay silent about. And everybody will lean forward and they'll want to hear what you have to say. One of my brothers the other day, he had the courage to speak up about Christians and how the bastardization of Christianity being morphed for all sorts of bigotry and racism, all these things. And he literally said, I cannot stay silent about this one day longer. And he teed it up, and it was an amazing post. It was the most courageous post I've ever seen him do. And I knew in his community, he lives in Texas, it was like, oh, this is a big deal right here. But the more that we see these posts start actually hitting the airwaves, it's us as menfolk dropping the pebbles into the ocean, creating ripples, and the ripples turn into tsunamis. I hope you just got chills in the same way that I did. This is what change can look like. This is what the elevation of humanity can look like. This is what the transformation of safety can look like for everybody. I happened to start following a woman on social media who had been trafficked by a billionaire. And this woman's courage is so beyond anything that most of the men I know who think they're courageous ever can stand for. If men had the courage that this woman has, even just a pinky full of this woman's courage, they'd be moving mountains on this regard. This woman is out there in a court case, in a legal battle. Her traffickers are all free right now. And she's out there naming them. She's putting photos. And honestly, I'm not going to lie. It will not surprise me if she is murdered, okay? Because there are too many powerful people that are being implicated. And she named two of them, one of whom is her husband, but she showed us the man who linked her to her husband and all the parts that have went into this. And she's like, these men are roaming free today and they're on Facebook. So I went and looked them up, and sure enough, there they are. And then I saw that one of them is connected to a female that I'm connected to on Facebook. And what were my choices? Well, I could have just stayed silent, but instead, what I said to her was, listen, and I sent her the link to this other woman's video, and I said, listen, you can make your own decisions here, but one of the men in your friends list is this guy. And so I'm just saying, I don't know if you're aware of this. I don't know if you know this, but you might want to reach out to this woman and just find out a little bit more of her experience. And really what I was saying was, like, you might not want to be interacting with that guy in whichever way they might be interacting. And I only got a 2-word response back, which was thank you. And I found it really interesting. Like, I don't even know what to make of that. Like, but it's not mine to make anything of it. She gets to do with that information what she will, but it's me not just going, well, I'm just going to let that woman continue to interact with that guy, naive, but most men would just not touch that issue. And so I think we get to, as action items, we get to start speaking up, and we will feel a collective exhale in women around the world as more of us start speaking our truth. What we really know as little boys, you knew when a treatment of a girl was not okay. You knew. But somewhere along the way, you got programmed to close your eyes a little bit, or that the risks of listening to that truth inside you became too great. But I can't think of something more noble that speaks to that true, pure, primal protector energy inside of us that just knows this is what it means to be a good person. And you get to own responsibility and forgive yourself for your past mistakes, take accountability for it as much as you can, and imperfectly take action today. Do not let your past mistakes and cringe of your own history limit you from taking a stand today. And I invite all women listening to this, share this with every man that you know. Ask them, say, will you take 1 hour out of your day, even to listen to this on 2x speed if need be? Ask your boys, your sons, to listen to this. Share this with your girlfriends. Share this with all your female friends. Like, this is my best attempt. I'll do it on my social media posts, but this is my best effort to speak to this, to say, let's raise the consciousness. It's not to create shame. It's not, I mean, some people probably should go to jail, okay? The rapists and the pedophiles, they need to have help. They need to have all sorts of things, but they need to be not allowed to continue that behavior. But for the most part, most of us are good-hearted men who just don't have anybody having this conversation. So please use this asset, use this recording as something that can expand the conversation that most men don't have any men around them having. And maybe we create a ripple effect out into other men around the world who begin to say, right, I'm not going to participate in that anymore. Come what may. Come what may. And one by one, we will have a revolution of men that are saying, no more. No more. And I'm not perfect at this thing, but gosh darn it, I can speak up to it now. Fuck it. Come what may. That's what it's going to take. And men, this is what the ladies are asking of us. All of this, everything in here. They'll go, they're nodding their head saying, that's right. And the reason women are listening to this is because they need to hear men saying it. It will start increasing their feelings of safety in their bodies to hear men saying this. And certainly a man that has some form of a platform who's willing to put it all on the line to have this conversation. Yeah, that's right. So this is why I'm doing this. Thank you for being here with me. I ask you to share this as widely as you possibly can. Not for my benefit, but for all of your families, your societies, your cultures, your communities, your nation state, your cities. This is my pebble dropping in the ocean. Will you amplify it? Will you send it to 5, 10, 20 people and say, take a listen to this? Because this is the conversation that's not being had in the locker rooms and in the boys' clubs and in the boys' trips that they're taking, or the Saturday night get-togethers, or the Buffalo Wings at the bar watching, the Giants game. But maybe it could begin to be. Maybe it could begin a quiet to loud revolution of men who begin to go, right, there's at least one other man. That guy, Alok, man, I listened to him and he had the courage to say something and really speak all these things that I really know deep down inside are true. We all know it's true. Outside of the sociopaths and the psychopaths who don't have the part of the brain that can understand this, deep down, every misogynist knows that somewhere along the way that it got installed into them. And they got addicted to the power dynamics that misogyny feeds into a part of the soul that, the part of the mind, that is an addiction in and of itself. But until that can be replaced by the extraordinary feelings that occur when a woman says, thank you so much. This made me feel safer in the world to know that a man like you could speak like this. Thank you. See, we need a replacement for the dopamine hit that men get from misogyny. And let me tell you, men, the feeling you'll get by becoming a safer man in this world, even imperfectly, is so much more potent as a drug than the dopamine hits that you're getting from being a misogynist, even an unconscious one. Okay? And whatever you gain will far outweigh whatever you were afraid of losing. And your daughters will thank you. And your sons will eventually thank you too, even if they don't yet know what dad did. And all the moms out there, I invite you to start training your sons differently, right? Start holding a different standard for them. Have the courage to speak to them about what's right and wrong, and ask your husbands to listen to this and show up differently for your sons and your daughters. It's right here. It starts within our homes, everybody. We want big change at the societal level. It starts right inside our homes. And it starts with me. It starts with you. Who's ever listening to this, stop pointing the finger. Right? I'm looking at myself. Shit. Wow. I had a memory resurface from 6th grade. I was like, oh, damn. Yep, that was not okay. And I get to handle the shame of that and then forgive myself. And just all I can do is keep showing up differently today. That's it. That's all I can do. So, and I can energetically apologize into the world. To all the women listening, I hope you can hear this. On behalf of all men in the world that have all perpetrated sexual violence and other forms of violence and abuse to women, I apologize on all of our behalves. It was not okay. None of it was acceptable. None of it should have been tolerated. None of it should have been protected. None of it should have been excused. None of it was right. You deserved safety. You deserved security. You deserved protection. You deserved to be believed. Now, do I know that women sometimes falsely accused? That does occur. There's someone very dear, and I'm not going to speak about it on this. I don't have permission to speak about it. But there's someone who I know that had a huge reputation, and he was canceled. And did he make a couple small mistakes? Yeah, like he made a couple decisions that he should not have made. But they actually weren't even sexual in nature. But he got canceled as a result. They weren't even sexual, and they weren't even involving touch. That's the crazy part about this. So is there small abuses of this? Yes, but they're tiny. They're like, let's not get things twisted that those occasional lies by a very infinitesimally small number of women outweighs the unbelievable amount of assault that's occurring by men towards women. And then men towards boys and men too, right? That would be the priests and all this. So we get to raise the vibrational frequency. We get to set a new standard. We get to start with ourselves. We don't need to point the finger, and we don't need to throw shame at anybody, much less ourselves. We just get to start doing something different. So to all you women, you deserved safety. You deserved protection. You deserved to be believed. So on behalf of the entire system and all the men out there that have not believed you, that did not stand up for you, that did not protect you, or who actively participated in your abuse, your violation, the lines getting crossed, or closed their eyes, I apologize to you on behalf of all of us who have been complicit in this in one way, shape, or another. It was not right. It does not need context, by the way. That's what a lot of people will say. Well, let's get into the context of how that happened. Well, look, you see, you don't understand. No, we need to cut through that shit. This doesn't need context. You know in your heart what was wrong, and so do I. And so do basically all the men that I know. Any man, certainly outside of just the violent criminals who have been so likely abused and traumatized themselves, either sociopaths or psychopaths, but the vast majority are not that. The vast majority were traumatized along the way themselves and are requiring, needing major healing themselves. Got it. But that gets to happen outside of access to more potential victims to target. Thank you for being with me. Please share this far and wide. This is my best attempt at moving the needle. I love you with my full heart. Reach out to me if there's any ways in which I can transform your life, be part of your growth in any which way, shape, or form. To the men folk out there, if you're looking to start making these changes, reach out to me. We can begin to explore working together and see if there's some way in which I can collapse your timeline of what it's taken me to learn all this stuff. But beyond all that, just simply, let's change the conversation. Let's raise the standard of what's acceptable in our society and around the world, because this is happening around the world. This is a global issue. There is not one continent that does not have this issue front and center going on every day. And there's not one man on this planet who doesn't know a woman who's been violated. I think I could safely say that. So it's time. Enough is enough. Thank you for being with me. And thank you for sending this to anybody and everybody and asking them to take a listen. It'll be 1 hour out of their life that can radically transform the entire world if we begin to accelerate the spread of these ideas as a collective, starting with our own selves. I love you very much.